Hey everybody, welcome to a DM's Guide video that is actually going to be more geared towards the players for this one. So what I have decided to do is basically try and do a video that is a no judgment explanation of the majority of the rules in D&D, the just, base components of what you're going to understand. I'm just going to operate from the assumption that you do not know anything, and I'm going to try and make a very, very short section right up front where I try to explain sort of the just base mechanics. And I'm going to try to keep that to under 10 minutes, and then I'll have a slightly larger section where I sort of explain the slightly more in-depth situation. But let's dig in, because we're almost to a minute, and I haven't done anything, so I only have 9 minutes, oh no! So the only thing that is truly necessary, well, there's 3 things that are necessary for playing Dungeons and Dragons, and those things are your character sheet, some dice, and your imagination. You can borrow dice from people, and your imagination, everybody's got one of those, and you take it with you everywhere you go. But the character sheet is something that you should hang on to. It's good to have some of the information written down so that if something were to happen to your character sheet, you would be able to know, like, okay, I don't know everything that I have. I don't know all of the spells that I have all of the time, if you're very high level, but you do have all of the rules. So I'm going to be using the most simple class. It's also my favorite to explain essentially what your character can do. And this is primarily concerning combat at first. So we're going to be talking about that. Combat is in D&D, it ranges, depending on your dungeon master, from anywhere from like a third of the game, maybe even less, to 90% of what you're going to be dealing with. I like to try and keep mine at 60-40, going from roleplay to combat, from session to session, switching which of those it is. But let's go ahead and make the most simple character. We'll say human fighter. Okay, so at level 1, you will notice that you have these things on the side. These are your ability scores. These numbers, I don't like how this works, but this is how Roll20, the website I'm using as a visual, this is how it categorizes it. It says the number that is your actual score is in this little box, and you will notice that they are all 10s. That's just because this is the most basic that you can get. If you increase it by factors of 2 in either way, that score will either go up or go down. So this is a fighter, so let's make a pretty good fighter. So strength is important, sure. Dexterity is important, sure. That way they can use any weapons. Constitution, very important. Intelligence, not as important for how we're going to play this fighter, so that's a 12. Wisdom, wisdom is good for everybody. You like to make it a dump stat, because I'm bad as a player. And then charisma, I find it very difficult to not play high charisma characters. I don't like it. So you'll notice that when I made the character a fighter, he got these saving throws. But let me circle back to that. So you see that the 16 is a 3. That is my strength modifier. So if I am going to be doing something that includes strength, if I am rolling a d20 and I get to add a modifier because of one of my skills or anything else, 3 is what I will be adding to it. That's the sort of basic idea. That works for all of your stats. They each do different things. They each affect different rolls. Sometimes you can argue one stat over another. Next to strength, you see there is the proficiency bonus. That is essentially how good your character is at things that they are good at. It's a number that can codify it. Every time that you go up, every time that you reach what are standard ability scores, standard ability score improvement levels, your next level is going to give you a higher proficiency bonus. At the beginning of the game, it is 2, and at level 20, it is 6. So let's say that I am going to level 5. My proficiency bonus goes up to 3. So these saving throws are a good example. As a fighter, you start with saving throw proficiencies in Strength and Constitution. These are checked. That means that I am proficient in them. So for Strength, that is literally Strength. It's my Strength modifier goes into it, and it's 3. And then it also has the proficiency bonus, which is 3. So it becomes 6. Constitution, it's 2 plus 3, it equals 5. The different classes affect your proficiency bonuses in different saving throws. When you create a character, your background and your class give you the ability to choose your skill proficiencies. So let's say that my fighter is good at acrobatics, animal handling, survival, perception, and intimidation. So when I put my proficiency bonus in them, it adds 3 to them, and you can see that next to acrobatics, in parentheses, there is dex. That means that it is using dexterity to affect that score. So it is 3 plus 3, it equals 6. That's fairly simple. Your hit dice, let's go over here. You'll see your hit dice is right here. This is sort of your, this is like your vitality section, this middle box here. I should probably start from the top down, but that's not what I said. So your hit dice are basically your pool of ability to heal yourself over time, if that is not including a long rest. A long rest is a period of 8 hours that you spend not doing any really strenuous activity. So right now at level 5, I, a fighter, have 5 hit dice. So if we were to take a short rest, a period of, say, an hour, that's the minimum that you can take a short rest within, while everyone else is doing something, my character needs to heal, needs to regain hit points, I would expend hit dice and roll them. So I would gain back 10 and then 7, which is pretty good. For HP, let's drop me back down to level 1, just because at level 1 my HP is simple, and then we will go up to level 2. So at level 1 I have 10 HP because that is my hit dice. That is what my hit dice is. The different classes, that's what decide. The different classes are what affect what your hit dice are. So the more martial frontliney type classes will have the higher hit dice. The fighter has the second highest. It's tied with paladins and rangers, and it's right behind barbarians. And then the lowest are your wizards and sorcerers. So I have a 10, and then I get to add my Constitution score to it. That is the way that Constitution comes most in handy. It affects how hardy your character is and how good they are at dealing with things. So at level 1, I have 12 HP. Say that there is a wizard in the party, their hit dice is a d6, so they would have 6, and say that they made Constitution their lowest stat, and say that they got a 9. If they got a 9, then they would have a -1, because it is less than 10, and with that 9, they essentially would have a -1, and so they would start with 5 HP. So then we go up a level, and when you gain HP, you either take the average of your hit dice, which for a d10, I believe is 6, but let's say that it's 5, because I don't want to check. So I could take the average and go up by 5, and then also my Constitution modifier, which would make it 7, which would put me at 19, or I could roll a d10. So let's go ahead and roll another hit dice, see what we get. I got, oh, and it automatically added my Constitution, so there you go. If you're using Roll20, that's a good way to do it. And I would go up by 12, effectively doubling my HP for this level, which is pretty good. So another thing that is very, very useful about Roll20 is I can just pull in a longsword, so I don't have to explain that too in depth. But I'm going to be detailing the weapons. This is going to go over 10 minutes, but I can edit it down. So the longsword that I get as a fighter, I get weapon proficiencies, so I can use pretty much any weapon. But you will notice that there are some things in here for the longsword. So I'm attacking with my strength stat. So when I'm going to roll to attack, that's this middle box, is the attack bonus box. That's how most people write it in 5th edition. That's how I do it. You'll notice my proficiency bonus went back down to 2 when I went down to level 1. I'm level 2 now. And then my strength score is 3. or my strength proficiency. Fuck. So you notice that when I went back down to level 1 and then up to level 2, my proficiency bonus went back down to 2. So I am proficient as a fighter in fighting. I have that weapon proficiency. So in that attack bonus box, I get a +2. And then because my strength modifier is 3, it goes up to a +5. Now for damage, you don't get to use your proficiency because, I mean, you are proficient at hurting things, but that includes just, tapping them. So the damage of a longsword when it's used one-handed, because the longsword can be used one- or two-handed, is a D8 for one-handed. So it is a roll of a D8, and then you will add your strength ability modifier because it uses your strength modifier for the damage calculation, and it becomes a D8 + 3. So let's make an attack. And okay, so I rolled pretty well. I rolled a 14, naturally. If you're playing with a real dice, you would roll your 14. You would look at your attack bonus box. You would see +5. You would add that to your roll. It's a 19. Then in your damage, you have 1d8 + 3. So you roll that, and I roll an 8. Really good. I'm rolling really well. This fighter should become a real character. I also made his stats really good. But so I got max damage for my level 2 fighter, which is 11, 8 + 3. There are a few other things that I want to go over, so let's go over them. You will see the speed box that I have. So the standard speed of a medium creature, which is a human-sized creature, or just above, just below, is 30. So let's go to one of my various maps, shall we? Let's go... I don't want to use a map that my real players have seen. Let's go here, and let's say that this over here is our fighter. And so right now, our fighter is at this distance. So I have 30 feet of movement. If one of these squares that you can see is a total of 5 feet, then I have essentially 6 squares. So I can go anywhere that is within those 30 feet. So right now I could run and make it to here. I can make it to here. I can make it to here. I play with diagonals. That's how this map is also calculating. But so I could make it anywhere here. So let's say that I want to use my movement at the start of my turn. I do not have to. I can break up the action economy of my turn in any way that I can. Let me actually explain the action economy. So there are 4 things that you can essentially do on your turn. You have your movement, you have your action, you have your bonus action, and you have any free actions that you might need to use. Talking is a free action. You can't talk for an hour while still being considered in combat, but you can say things. Some small bits of, moving something, that kind of thing, can sometimes be considered a free action. Pulling out your first weapon, that's part of your movement action. It could feasibly be done while you are moving, or it could be considered in the 6 seconds that a Dungeons & Dragons turn takes place. Drawing your sword as you're moving to just reposition yourself within your 5 feet little square, that's perfectly fine. So let's say that I move at the beginning of my action, or the beginning of my turn. Like I said, you don't have to. I come over here, and my fighter wants to lift up her sword and make an attack on one of these fellows. So it is another 19, good for this fighter. And let's say that she is attacking someone who is wearing no armor. So now we can talk about the armor class, which again I should have done a little bit earlier. But the armor class is essentially how easy is it to hit your character. It's a combination of their ability to get out of the way and their ability to take a hit and not be hurt by it. So right now it is just my dexterity score plus 10 because I'm not wearing armor. But let's say that I'm wearing chainmail, which just gives me a flat 16. So now any attack roll, let's say another fighter shows up with the exact same stats, makes an attack, a 12. 12 doesn't hit me. My armor class is a 16. If it rolls a 16 or higher, they are going to hit me. They are going to do damage to me. But I roll up on this unarmored person. I roll my 19. I get my maximum damage. I get my 6 damage, and I've hurt them. So now I have a bonus action. Fighters, for instance, have something called Second Wind. So if I did get hurt, I would be able to use my bonus action to use the ability Second Wind that I have. That's time period is a bonus action. If something is in Dungeons & Dragons, if it is something that you use, something that you do, and it is meant for combat, or it is possible to use in combat, it will likely have somewhere the time that it takes. Any attacks, any melee, or I guess I should say any weapon attacks, will be presumed to be an action. Any spells that you are casting will include in their casting time one action, or one bonus action, or one reaction, because that is something else that you get. You get a reaction, but let's go through the whole turn. So basically we have those 3 components. So let's say that my fighter is a little bit injured, and let's say that my fighter is actually right here, and we'll explain what a reaction is at the same time. This character that is in front of my fighter has a dagger out. They're the one who has hurt my fighter. My fighter has allies and wants to reposition herself so that she can better help the fight at large. So she is not going to be hurting this fellow right here. So already hurt, knowing that she is presumably going to take damage before anyone can heal her, let's say, she uses that Second Wind ability. And so that is bonus action right away. The bonus action gets my fighter some of her health back, and then she is going to dart over here. She leaves the melee range of the dagger of this opponent. Now this opponent is going to take that opportunity to make what is called an opportunity attack, using their reaction. A reaction is essentially something that you get one of, and you can use on your turn to do anything that has a reaction time. That is, essentially, it triggers because something else happens. That's the idea that you can take with it. They make this opportunity attack. Let's say they hit my fighter. My fighter realizes that one of their allies, who is way over here, has a spell up that means anyone within 30 feet of that character can be healed by just, finishing their turn there. Let's say that that's a really good spell that doesn't exist. It probably does. So this character is going to get here and is going to attack this character. They attack, they hit, let's just say, because this is a hypothetical scenario and that's fun, and then they cycle around them and get to here. After hitting, they can break up their movement, so they can go anything they want. They can use their movement in any way that they want to, as long as they are within the movement that they have. They get here, and they get a little bit more of that health. So that is essentially a character turn. That is the bare bones of a fighter. If you would like to start off with a fighter, I think they're great first characters, and I think they're great forever characters, because they are my favorite. There are other things here. So initiative. What initiative is it's basically just your dexterity modifier. At the beginning of a fight, it's like how quick-footed you are, and then once a fight starts, an entire round is basically 6 seconds. Don't need it. You have 6 seconds in your turn, and the people with the higher initiative are moving quicker at the start, and so once everything gets flowing, they are the first to act every 6 seconds. That's the way that you can look at it. But this is just a combat explanation. In the rest of this, I'll be explaining your skills a little bit more, and I'll be explaining how the 2 other major classes that make up the Venn diagram circles that create all of the other classes, how they really work. So thank you for watching. I'm going to edit this very sparingly, but thank you. Hey everybody, just wanted to add in here that I'm going to be including in the description a very, very brief Google document that just includes these basic rules that I'm kind of going over in, I think, even simpler terms. So if you would like to skip the rest of the video and just go give that a look, you are free to do so. Thanks. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit more in depth, and I'm going to use the examples of the other two, I think, major classes of the big three. Basically, you've got Fighter, Wizard, and Rogue, and I think that the other classes are essentially born out of this relationship. You take elements of one, you change the flavoring of it, and add a little bit more of one of the others, and you have most of the major classes. I would argue that Cleric could be added to this as a major 4, but I didn't want to use it, so I've decided that I believe in a big 3. But let's talk for a second about one of the things that I kind of glossed over. Let's talk about skills. So you have proficiencies in skills. Technically, each of your skills are affected by your ability modifiers. So this here, Rogue. Let's say that because of their background or because they are a rogue, they have proficiencies in acrobatics, deception, performance, sleight of hand, and stealth. Now, you will notice this proficiency bonus is a +3, and so their dex, which is a +5, gives them an 8 in acrobatics, and that makes sense. Rogues have something called expertise. That's why I thought that they would be the fun one to talk about here. Expertise effectively doubles your proficiency bonus. So whenever the rogue is going to be doing something sneakily with stealth, or trying to do something with their hands sneakily with sleight of hand, they would get a bonus of 11 instead of 8. Which raises this 5 to a much, much higher 16. So anything that you are going to be doing, including these skills, that's why it's important to pick out proficiencies that are sort of how you want to play your character. Let's say that you were playing a rogue, but the idea is maybe they're a former thief who now work to recover the stolen goods of the city's lower classes. When there's some gentleman thief cat burglar who's a reverse Robin Hood, who's a Scarlet Pimpernel. And your character is essentially working as a private investigator that's trying to get these, not precious, but these pawnable, family heirlooms that have been stolen. So they would likely want to have different skills. Insight would be good to tell if someone was lying. It would be good to know. It's good to be able to lie, and so it would be good to have deception. It would definitely be good to have perception. That's important for every character. Perception is essentially noticing things. It'd be good to have persuasion, be good to have performance, and probably good to have stealth. Probably more important than sleight of hand, although you could argue that former thief, sleight of hand being high, pretty good. There are other things that I think are good to show off with the rogue, because the rogue is essentially a class of class abilities. All classes are. That's what makes classes different. That's what makes the everything is based on these 3/4 classes, but with a little bit of flavor difference. That's what makes that a ridiculous thing for me to have said. Rogues have something that they are essentially built around, which is the sneak attack. If they have advantage for some reason, if they are flanking, it's a couple of different things that can add into this. They get extra damage on the attack roll. They also have something called Uncanny Dodge, which is important to note because it uses a reaction, which we talked about. So if the rogue were to be hit, if the 15 armor class was overcome, let's say that a big blast of ice from a cone of cold hit this rogue, and they took 37 points of damage. Well, they could drop down to 1, or they could have that and take, oh no, I have to do quick math, 18 points of damage. Rogues also have something that makes the action economy a little bit more easy for a rogue. A rogue can take things that would normally be actions, like taking the dash action, which essentially doubles your movement. A rogue can do that as a bonus action. Rogues are really good because they allow you to make use of your skills really well. They allow you to have high damage output if you are attacking and trying to purposefully get sneak attacks. And they also allow you to dart across the battlefield, hide. Disengage is great. It basically lets you not receive an attack of opportunity, and that's really good. Let's talk about weapons that have stuff added onto them. So this is a +1 dagger. What that basically means is it is a dagger that gets a +1 to hit and a +1 to damage. They typically go up to +3. I've heard legend of +5 things. That's ridiculous and fun. The +1 dagger here that we have, the normal attack bonus for a dagger for this rogue would be a +8. A +8 to hit. You would roll your d20. Let's say that you roll... So you roll a 14, you get to add 9. That's a 23. That's hitting most stuff. Then you would get to roll a d4, which is the damage dice of a dagger, and you would normally get to add 5. So you would roll your d4, 4, pretty good roll, and you would do a total of 9 damage. For this dagger, however, oh boy, bad example. For this dagger, so you roll a 6, and it instead adds 9, because you are getting that normal +8, and then because of the quality or some magical property to the dagger, you get a +1. So it goes from what would have been a 14 with a 6 + 8, you instead get 15. Then for the damage, you rolled the same 4. The +5 takes you to 9, and then the +1 puts you over the top to 10, which would be really, really good. Sneak attack at level 5 would net you, let's see here, 3d6. So let's say that you had advantage. You came in, and you are going to roll your 3d6. So you do a total of 6 + 5. You do 11 piercing damage on top of the initial 10. You just did 21 damage in one round with a dagger, which is pretty good. Let's move on to wizards. I've heard that they are never late. They just appear much later into the video than I would hope. So, that's a bad joke. I'm leaving it in. So the wizard is the, prototypical spellcaster. They cast based on intelligence because it's their understanding of the arcane world, and so I'm going to use this as my example to talk about spells. So this is your spell sheet with a standard Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition character sheet. They will be on the 3rd sheet. You will see at the top you have your character name, you have your spellcasting ability, so by class it will include in the introduction to your class what you essentially use to cast. So let's go back to the rogue page. There is a archetype, because all classes are broken down into archetypes, called the Arcane Trickster. For the Arcane Trickster, I sure hope that it says it somewhere. But I know that the Arcane Trickster, just like the Wizard, which is what they borrow. Oh, here we go. The Arcane Trickster uses Intelligence as their spellcasting ability modifier for wizard spells, because they cast just like wizards. So wizards, they use Intelligence to cast. So then you have a spell save DC and a spell attack bonus. The spell attack bonus is calculated the same way as a weapon attack would be. So you cast with Intelligence, so it is a +5, and then you are proficient at casting spells, so it is a +3. Totaling a +8. Your your spell save DC is for spells that you just kind of make happen. You are attacking an area, you are creating an area of effect, you are making them do something with their mind, and so it's not something that you are doing, it's something that they have to overcome. The way that you calculate your spell save DC is you will basically take your spell attack bonus, because it is your spellcasting ability modifier, Intelligence, +5, and your proficiency bonus, +3, and then you are going to add that to 8. So right now, for a wizard, that is a 16, which is very, very high for a level 5 character. And then we get into your actual spells. So this is something that I think, because a lot of people's exposure to Dungeons and Dragons comes through watching live streams or playing listening to podcasts. The nature of cantrips is a little bit harder to grasp when you aren't having it explained. A cantrip is basically a spell that your character knows permanently, regardless of how their other spells work, because spells work differently for different classes, how you have the ones that you can cast. The cantrips you always know, and they are always available to you. They might require some type of component, so you might not be able to use them all the time if you don't have that thing, if you don't have a bit of dust or something. But they follow every other spellcasting rule. So you will notice that they do have a casting action, they have a range, that's how far they can go. They have a target, they have their components, they have how quickly they happen, and then they have how it works. So let's show you an example. So right here, let's say that this is our wizard. Let's say that this is our wizard's enemy. So our wizard is all the way up here. One of the wizard's allies is fighting one of the wizard's enemies. The wizard wants to cast Firebolt. The enemy is 95 feet away. The wizard is going to cast Firebolt. Let's see if that would hit. Let's say that the enemy has an AC of 14. They hit! They do 10 damage. That's great. That's grand. That's wonderful. The spells that you have will usually tell you the damage amount. For Firebolt, it is a D10 at first level, and it goes up by a D10 when you go to level 5. I sure hope that it rolled 2D10, but maybe it didn't. We don't need it to. It did. Isn't that great? There are other spells that work very, very differently. Let's look at Shield. Shield is, your casting time is a reaction. So let's say that the wizard was hit by an arrow, and it was a poison arrow, and so it would be really, really painful. The wizard can use her reaction to throw up a shield. Arcane energy shows up, grabs the arrow out of the air. The wizard's fine. The wizard doesn't get hit. Because let's say that the wizard's AC is this piddly 12. The attack is only a 14, because the wizard's an easy target. So the wizard casts Shield, and the way that Shield works is the AC goes up by 5 until the wizard's next turn. AC is now 17. Wizard's looking great. We've got other spells that do other things. Scorching Ray, you'll see range is also 120 feet. You would still be making an attack, but let's talk about spell slots. Your spell slots are your number of times that you can cast your leveled spells. So for Shield, you, right now, in this fantasy world where you only have one first level spell, which I do not recommend, the wizard can only cast Shield a total of 4 times a day. So if the wizard has cast it twice, going forward, any more stuff that the wizard is doing, they only have this in their back pocket 2 more times. So Scorching Ray, let's say that they were to use it twice, they would only have 1 more time to pull that out. But they have another level of spell. So let's say that they are really desperate. They want to use Scorching Ray. It's a powerful spell. You have 3 attacks, basically, by casting a single spell. And if you go up a level, you get another ray. You get another attack. So instead, they decide to use a 3rd level, because any spell that mentions it, you can cast up. You can't cast down. You can't cast lower than the original level, but you can cast higher. So I cast Scorching Ray at 4th level using a 3rd level spell slot. What that means is my 2nd levels are fine, but I do lose that 3rd level spell slot. I cast it. It's a more efficient spell. Sure hope that it would have worked. Let's go back up for the final bit of our example here. There are spells that have different casting times. So there are spells that have a bonus action casting time. When you are casting spells, you can only cast multiple times in a turn if you use a action spell and then a bonus action cantrip or spell that is lower than the action spell that you cast. which is probably something that you can talk about with your dungeon master, not me. I don't have the best grasp of it. I forget it a lot. But let's say that you are tuckered out for the day. You've used up most of your spell slots, and so you want to rest. You're in hostile territory, and so you want to create something that is easy to keep watch over and is going to keep you safe. You are going to cast a spell called Galders Tower. The casting time for it is 10 minutes. So if you were in combat, each round is 6 seconds. That means that 1 minute is 10 rounds. So if you were going to be casting Galders Tower in combat, it would take you 100 rounds. Out of combat, 10 minutes. Everybody else is just, say, one person's starting a fire, one person is reading out of a book that you got that has some information on the enemy. You cast this spell, you have your tower. It's a great place. If there are more people who might be attacking you, you have a defensible location. That is always good to have. And then finally, let's talk about that spell that I mentioned that you just do, and the enemy has to deal with it. And we're going to talk about the version of it that is probably the most joked about Dungeons & Dragons spell, to the point that I think a lot of players don't take it, even though it's one of the best spells. And that spell is Fireball. So when you cast Fireball, you are throwing a explosion at the enemy. You're not really throwing it at the enemy, though. You are throwing an explosion that's going to explode where they are. And what that means is that anyone who is in range of that explosion is going to have to find a way to not get hurt. The way that works in game terms is those saving throws that we mentioned back in the first half of this video. You would make one of those with dexterity. So let's have our fighter make a dexterity saving throw. He is trying to not get obliterated by this fireball. He has a 10. With our wizard, what is our spell save DC? It's a 16. The fighter doesn't pass. The fighter is going to take all of the damage of our fireball. Let's just see it without me telling you how much damage a fireball does. 20 damage, and that is a very low fireball. So instead of attacking, the wizard is using a spell that happens. And I think that is something that's really good to include in your character, is basically saying, you are going to deal with this. Here you go. For Fireball, if they succeed, they will take half damage. For other saving throws, there's a different effect if they succeed. Most of them, it's half damage if it's a damage-dealing spell. But there aren't only damage-dealing spells. There are so many spells that are great. Great for roleplay, great for supporting your allies, great for just hindering your opponents without harming them. You can cast spells that make it easier for your allies to do things out of combat. So if your ally is going to be doing, let's say, acrobatics, there is a spell that clerics have called Guidance. What that could do is you have a clumsy... Let's say you have a dwarven paladin, pretty clumsy. They have to try to jump over a ravine onto a precarious little ledge in order to make sure that they time the jump right, get to just the right time. You might cast Guidance, and then when they would make their roll, they would be able to add another small dice to it, and it would raise the roll. So don't focus exclusively on damage, but like I mentioned in that first video, in the first part of the video at least, combat is likely going to happen. When you are a spellcaster, you really do have access to the highest damage output, and it can be smart to take it, but you might talk to the other players at your table, and if you find out that the fighter really wants to fight and really wants to, be Aragorn, and your DM is cool with that and is going to give them the ability to be an extremely powerful fighter, you might want to be a support wizard. And that's perfectly fine. You should be playing the character that you want to play. But I hope that this has helped you out, and I hope that you feel like you understand your character sheet a little bit better. Thanks!